Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Whether you are buying for yourself or your business, here you will find tips, techniques and knowledge to support your journey to buying smart. Interviewing business owners and technical experts to give you information and guidance before parting with your money. Save money, time and get what you want when you want it. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. I'd like to introduce you to a colleague of mine now, a chap called Ian Greenwood. He's the owner and director of 4G Water. I've worked with Ian for quite some years now in various roles and have really grown to respect the advice and expertise that Ian brings to myself and the businesses that I work for, respect to the safety of the water supply, its storage and management. Not a lot of people really think about the water supply and worry about it too much. It's only when you really work in business, then you start to realize the implications of this. So Ian, great to have you on board. I wonder if you could just give the, hi, I just wonder if you could give me some background on yourself and 4G Water.
So for quite a few years, I worked for a large water treatment company. I started off at the age of 19 as an engineer. Did that for a few years, went into facilities management after that for a few years, and then came back to the industry in a sales service role. Back to the same company. Started doing a sales role as well as service, and ended up getting to a point where I felt like I wanted to try it myself, and started up 4G Water nearly 3 years ago, and here we are today.
Never look back.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Excellent. That's what I'm pleased to hear. Superb. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about can be very useful to the people watching or listening to this is to understand the implications of not maintaining the water supply. Obviously, this is quite prevalent and fairly well known to facilities people. But for people in their own homes, then that's not so perhaps at the forefront of their minds. Particularly, I'm thinking of people with holiday homes that may be vacant for quite some times. And I know you do quite a lot of work in this area, obviously, with respect to Legionella, what you can do to prevent and test for Legionella, the system cleans and disinfections that you do. I know you what we call dose water tanks, and you manage shower heads, do temperature testings, and all sorts of manner of things that I don't think most people will be aware of. So I wonder if you could briefly touch on those subjects, and I'm sure we can go into them in far more detail in a later podcast. But I wonder if you could touch on those subjects now and explain what they are and what the implications of them being perhaps not as good as they could be.
Well, in our case, we mainly work in the commercial sector, so we're business to business primarily, and the reason for that is that if you own or operate a business or have responsibility for the health and safety of a building, and you're supplying water in any way that could come in contact with either staff or the general public, you have a duty of care to make sure that that water doesn't contain any harmful bacteria or organisms that could make people ill or even worse. So what we do is, one thing the HSC is a mandatory legal requirement is to have a Legionella risk assessment if you are responsible for building services. So we carry out Legionella risk assessments for commercial premises, and what they are exactly that. They're a risk assessment. So our consultant goes in and finds the risk of you being able to generate harmful bacteria within your systems. And there's lots of different ways in which that can be done. So there's three main things. The experts will, tell me there's a lot more, but the main things that we look for is what you want to stay away from is ambient temperature. So bacteria grows at most prevalent at 37 degrees. So that's why when we do have a contract somewhere, one of the methods of keeping bacteria from growing is temperature control. So that's why we'll do temperature monitoring, make sure the cold is below 20 and the hot is above 50 at the outlet. Obviously, there's other temperatures for different parts of the system as well that it needs to stay at. The other thing is stagnation. So we will look at areas that aren't being used anymore. A lot of, not so much nowadays, but there used to be a lot of disabled toilets in buildings that weren't getting used, as well as cleaners' cupboards and things like this. A lot of disabled toilets have been repurposed to multi-use toilets, which is great for us because it means that they're not full of boxes anymore. People storing their odds and ends because, you know, rent's expensive, and sometimes the disabled toilets that didn't get used as much as they probably might have thought they would be when they were installed.
Yeah.
So we would, the risk assessor would come in and look for areas of stagnation as well, dead legs, dead ends, things where a sink or a shower has been cut out and the pipework's been left in place. So there's lots of stagnant water which can grow bacteria in that piece of pipework, and then that will feed back into the rest of the building as well. So, and the other thing is food as well. So, for example, if you have a cold water storage tank, you get a certain amount of sediment and debris that comes in on the incoming mains, and you don't often see that if you have mains running straight to a tap, unless you have a tap with one of those filter screws in the end, and you know it blocks up every now and again. You have to knock it out. But cold water storage tanks are incredibly good at catching sediment, and it stays along the bottom of the tank. And this is also very nice for bacteria to proliferate in and to grow, which is why quite often we clean out and disinfect cold water storage tanks. As for yourself, you know, you work in a production factory, and you have tanks that feed your production lines because you need a certain amount of water to do what you do for your tests on your pumps and things like that. So in that case, because the water's recirculating in through hot pumps, I assume, and things like that, we keep a certain amount of chlorine in the system just to make sure that bacteria can't grow, a bit like a swimming pool. Because we know the temperature is going to rise and drop and things like that. So we keep a certain amount of chlorine in the system, which we check weekly.
Okay, because you referred to timescales there. So obviously HSE requirements and guidelines, are they stipulating the frequency and the time periods between testing of different things? You mentioned temperature testing and Legionella as examples. So what would be the prudent way of making sure that everything is safe? What frequency would you recommend?
Everything's in HSG 274 Part 2 and Part 3 for other systems. The best advice would be from the risk assessor that came to risk assess your particular building, because every building's different, everything has different systems, everything has different risks. So my best advice would be to, once you have your risk assessment done, is to sit down with the consultant and go through what needs to be done, or your account manager or whoever would do that with you. And they quite often have a traffic light system, you know, red being matters of eminent concern, things we need to get done straight away that are particularly hazardous, right down to green. So, you know, it would be desirable to have this done. As regarding timescales, that's completely down to the risk assessor, although there is standard guidance on temperature monitoring that it should be done monthly. There's other things that should be done, such as tank inspections every year, which includes temperatures taken from the incoming mains and the body of water inside the tank. Everything else would pretty well everything else would be down to the advice of the risk assessor. So it would be dependent on the condition of the systems that they're presented with on the day that they come in. Okay.
I guess the frequency of use, the volume going through, I guess, pasting is or has impacts. So it's not as straightforward. One answer fits all. Then it's really specific to the the property that you're looking at?
Absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of guidance in the HSG, but obviously you can't create one document to cover every single situation.
Yeah.
So the onus does fall down on the risk assessor at the moment, more so than ever before, because they're the people that are looking at the particular system, that they're looking at. So so for example, if we just carried out a load of risk assessments for standpipes on beaches, that would be
Okay.
different to doing your factory.
Mm.
Or a school or a college or a hospital. Hospitals and healthcare sector have an extra layer of guidance on top. It really does depend on what they're looking at. There really is no sort of one size fits all
Right.
system.
Okay. So people are looking at best practice. It really is designing something specific for your property, your business, and then working with the assessor to identify the
Yeah,
opportunity for least risk, I guess, and documenting it very
yeah,
thoroughly.
yeah, and even that changes for the same building.
Yeah.
So one risk assessment that you have, say in 2016, you have another one in 2018, and they found some new things or things have changed. You've taken out some machinery or you've added bits, or the temperatures have changed. Plant gets older, it stops operating as efficiently.
Mhm.
Down where we live on the south coast, we have issues with scale that
Right.
changes things significantly very quickly. So it's yeah, so we yeah, so even in the same building, things can change quite quickly as
Right.
regarding Legionella.
Okay, certainly can't be complacent. One of the things, obviously, because we were talking earlier that this is currently a COVID-19 situation, hence our unkept hair, should we say?
Yeah,
And obviously, there are a lot of businesses, particularly hotels. You mentioned schools as well, that pretty much unoccupied. Um, so one has to be quite careful, I guess, because thinking of myself traveling on business, you get into hotels a lot. You are quite reliant on the systems and processes in those properties, particularly after a long period of, as we have now, where they've not been used. And I don't think people are necessarily aware of that. So I guess you've got an awful lot of work to do when things start opening up.
yes, yeah. So we look after quite a few schools and hotels, and we're currently gearing up for the 1st of June. The Prime Minister has announced that primary schools will be reopening.
Hmm.
So we've got a big list of primary schools that. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago they all received a letter saying that before they open, they have to have a disinfection of the water systems carried out. And when they got that letter, they all started phoning me, and of course, it was like, yeah, we want this done, but we don't know when. So,
Yeah.
but now we know. So, yeah, half term week, would have been half term. All our guys are at schools doing disinfections, and we've uh, got instant Legionella tests, because normally Legionella tests that you take to a lab take 10 days roughly to come
Okay.
back, which is obviously in this situation no good.
Mhm.
So we've got instant Legionella tests, which take about half an hour. They're a bit more expensive, but we get a fairly accurate result on the day. So
Yeah.
we can report that back pretty quickly and
Okay.
say that, you're all safe to open as best we can.
Okay, so you don't have to follow through with a subsequent laboratory test to reconfirm. It's that accurate, then it's a green light.
Some are, it's up to the client if they want to do the belt and braces approach. Some are having tests done on top, that's going to the lab. It will take a few days to come back. If we're getting any positive results back, then obviously we have to then take a sample to send off to the lab
Yeah.
after we've carried out a disinfection, just to make absolutely sure. But yeah, so a lot of hotels have played it a bit differently. So a lot of them are just shutting down. I haven't spoken to any for maybe a month or two now. So it will be interesting to see what checks they've been carrying out in that time. But definitely the advice from the HSE is to carry on flushing your taps and what have you, just to make sure that it isn't a nightmare when you open back up again.
Right.
Because the normal advice is any little used outlets should be ran once a week.
Right.
Now they're saying that might not be enough in this situation where it's mothballed but not mothballed, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So they're now saying to simulate usage, which would be certainly more than once a week. So it'd probably be running the taps every day, I would imagine.
Okay. And what sort of time period are we thinking of? Is this just running for a couple of minutes, half an hour? What's the parameters of
A good flush through? Like I say, it all depends on the system. You know, the old thing where you run your cold tap in your kitchen until it runs cold, and then you know you've flushed out all the water in your house, and it's coming from the street mains. That's pretty well it. You know, have a good idea of how big the building is and where the source is coming from. 5-10 minutes, plenty of time to get through any building. Just until I guess it reaches temperature of what it should be, I assume. But yeah, so like I say, it's all different for every type of building, but I'd say a good 5-10 minutes would be adequate.
Yeah, but on a frequent basis, obviously. Yeah, keep it moving.
At the moment, with nothing being used in your building, I would say daily.
Yeah. Okay. And then you got shower heads. Obviously, every hotel room has a shower. So do those need to be switched on and get up to full temperature, or what's the requirements for a shower?
The main risk with the shower heads is because they create an aerosol, and the only way you can contract Legionella disease is by inhaling it into your lungs.
Right.
And it's the effects are very similar as COVID-19 actually. There's a lot of similarities between the two. So yeah, with showers, the main thing to do showers is make sure they're free of scale, because scale harbors bacteria, and also giving them a flush through. And to be honest, if they're not being used, if you lower the shower head, so take it off or if you can, if they're on a hose, drop them down off the wall, to make sure that there isn't a nice U-bend of water sat in there. So to make sure they're all drained out and dry. And before they're used, I would recommend doing a Legionella sample on them, or if you're in a hotel, that's not 400 showers maybe. Sometimes that might not be feasible, but I'd recommend doing a selected amount. And if you are ever in doubt, you can get Legionella filters for showers, which will filter bacteria out as it goes through. So there's lots of things, but basically keep everything descaled and clean and running freely.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bit earlier, I think this has been a surprise to quite a few people, is the impact of scale. And as you know, obviously different parts of the country have different levels of scale buildup. So thinking from a domestic user, because how many people ever have their tanks cleaned out? Probably never. Is there any concern over that? Why is there a different rule for business as there is to the home? Is it because of the volume of water that's being churned over, or
there's no rules for the home.
Right.
This is the HSC, which only covers businesses. So health and safety of workers and the general public. So in your house, I get this asked a lot, and almost every training course I do, I get asked, what about my house? They should be worrying about their place of work, but they ask about the house.
Yeah.
And I say, as long as you don't live in a house with a wing you haven't been into for quite a while, most houses, the flow through of water is quite high.
Yeah.
I've got a 4-year-old, so the flow through of water is very high in my house, as well as electricity. So houses are generally safe. If your outdoor garden tap probably is the biggest risk.
Right. Your hose pipe, I guess, in the garden is
Your
left
hose
over
pipe,
the winter.
yeah, if you leave it on the ground over winter and it bakes up in the sun in the summer and things like this, again, just be sensible, give it a flush through, somewhere like that, straight down a drain, instead of putting it straight onto the sprinkler.
Yeah.
Give it a good run through before you start watering your plants.
Okay.
But as regarding scale in the home, yeah, of course, we all know the kettle scales up every now and again, and your element in your hot water cylinder every 10 to 20 years goes snap, and you have to get a plumber out. So, and that's because of scale. So there's lots of companies that are able to fit water softeners into your house. And things like this, or just yeah, I guess that's really it. Just try, you can edit that bit out, can't you? all the rambling.
That's okay. Just thinking now about for somebody like a facilities manager who needs to identify a reputable company to undertake this work, because the implications are quite extreme if things go wrong. So what kind of qualifications and accreditations should they be looking for? What sort of things should be mandatory for them to observe and check?
There's no mandatory accreditations to be a water treatment provider, none at all. But there are some things you can look out for. So members of the Legionella Control Association, for example, have been audited within an inch of their life every year. Some people argue it's once a year, it's like an MOT, so you can't rely on that entirely. But to be honest, it's, I operated for the first couple of years without being a member of the LCA, the Legionella Control Association, because, I was starting up and it's expensive to do things like that. It takes a lot of time. And also you need to build up your evidence as well. So a lot of new companies within a year or two probably won't be members of the Legionella Control Association, but they will be giving the best advice and operating in the safest manner. So it really is, a good idea just to call these people in, sit down and talk to them, no matter how big their company is.
Right. But if you come across a company with the LCA certificate, that must be quite a good reassurance, do you say?
It is. It means they've got all their ducks in a row, and they're doing everything at least or higher of what is required from the Legionella Control Association, and it is a high bar as well. It's not an easy thing to do. I did it myself, and I was quite fortunate that I've worked for companies who are part of the LCA and have been for years. So it's kind of second nature to me as to what's expected and what's required. Which made things a lot easier than, I suppose, someone just coming in having not experienced any of that in the past. But yeah, no, they certainly do a thorough job in making sure that your processes and everything you do is to a high standard, at least.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about how one selects the right contractor for this sort of work. On my list then would be at least looking for the LCA certificate. If not immediately, then at a given point in time, if you, as we did, we had a lot of experience of working together. So we knew things were very clear on what the requirements were. And as you said, you had to build up the evidence, a bit like being at school, I guess, to prove of your competence.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can't apply for the Legionella Control Association on day one because, they've got nothing to audit or have a look at. So, yes, it is a case of building up the evidence. But having said that, trying to find the best contractor, how can you sum that up? You can't. Everyone's different. Every account manager is different. Every account manager has off days. So, and that's who you will be dealing with, is an account manager. So not everyone's for everyone. And so it's really up to the buyer to have a good look round. And I say that the more sit down face-to-face meetings you have with someone, the better.
Mhm.
or with as many people as you can. I mean, for example, your procurement, you tell me, what made you decide to choose me all those years ago?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that we worked with yourself with a very large organization. And not only did we use yourselves to do the work, but we also had an independent audit as well. So when you have an independent audit by a separate body who is verifying that the work that has been done by the contractor involved is good, there's only minor issues, and it's usually down to changes, as you say, in your business, then you have some reassurance that they clearly must know what they're doing. Otherwise, you'll find a horrendous report, red
Yeah,
flags everywhere, and that's something that obviously we didn't get. So, we knew with yourself, you clearly knew what the requirements were, and
yeah,
as you say, the account management, the person you deal with, has an awfully important role in bridging the communication gap and understanding the requirements of the customer. And as we all know, we either um, click with the person and understand each other very well, have good communication and frequent communication, or because sometimes you don't, and that's a rapport that you build over time. Um, but we all have to start somewhere, and
yeah,
as a procurer, then I'll be looking at a number of different companies. I'll be looking to understand what their history is, their customer base is, whether there's recommendations, the accreditations that are there, and reviewing the quotation in quite some depth. And myself, I'm a little bit of an Excel person, so I document the requirements that I find or the feedback I get, and compare those quite thoroughly with each other. And when I see gaps, then that's the time to start asking questions and just see if it's an honest omission, or there is something to it, or perhaps the other person's just trying to oversell. It's only when you've done the analysis that you can find out really where you think the middle ground is. And of course, you can refer to professional services, procurement bodies like Chartered Institute of Purchasing or Facilities Management to determine what kind of things should you be looking for. What are the red flags and the green flags, as I would put them. And of course, and then it comes down the bottom line to money. But for me, especially when it comes to something as important as the health and well-being of yourself and your colleagues, and your family, if you're thinking about things domestically, then that comes above the financial element first. Once you've got the right, you've chosen, shall we say, the top two or the two companies you feel most comfortable with, and you feel that are a good representation of best-in-class suppliers, then you can negotiate and discuss, obviously, costs and so forth. So yeah, it's as you say, it's a lot of analysis has to happen,
yeah,
and judgments have to be made. Okay.
yeah. Kind of. I guess it's a combination of analysis and gut feeling at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah,
And then after a year, you reassess it, and then I guess you just go on from there, really.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So we've had some quite good in-depth discussions there. If people want to contact you to explore 4G doing some work from them, what was the best way for them to discover you?
You can Google me, 4G Water. .co.uk.
Yeah.
Also, you can email info@4gwater.co.uk, or my website is www.4gwater.co.uk if you want to.
Okay. So there's plenty of opportunities. I guess at the moment you're going to be pretty busy with things firing up after COVID-19, hopefully. But
Absolutely.
you're always looking for new opportunities, I guess.
Yeah, well, like I say, the instant Legionella tests have really come into their own in this pandemic at the moment, specifically as we're not sure when stuff is opening up, and then it's just announced. So I never really found much of a market for instant Legionella testing previously, but this is definitely the one for it. So that's definitely a product we're using a lot of at the moment. It's made by HydroSense, so they're a good company. You can look them up as well. So yeah, if you would like any more information, feel free to contact me.
Okay, so you say that's
Yeah,
a bit of a game changer, even at home. Yeah, you say that's a bit of a game changer. Then is that a development as a result of COVID-19, or it was there all along? But
No, it's been around for a few years, and I've always looked at it, and people have always been obviously trying to sell it to me. And at the time, I couldn't really find a reason where we couldn't wait 10 days for a result. I mean, I know there's going to be sales arguments and things like that saying, well, no, you can know instantly, but yeah, but we've always, and I was the kind of person that I've always done it this way, so this is the way I'm always doing it. But actually, this pandemic has kind of opened my eyes a little bit to a few other products that I found really useful, particularly the instant Legionella tests. That you can get an accurate reading up to 100 CFUs per litre, which is a good benchmark, because anything below that, it's not safe, but it's a lot safer than above it. So that if you go on HSG 274 Part 2 on the government website, then that has all the information you'd need for Legionella levels. But yeah, so that's one of the products. And also quite interesting as well is that because I've started up this company from scratch a few years ago now, because we're mobile engineers and technicians and things like this, I set everything up to be mobile. So we have, we use clouds and internet-based programs, and, all my engineers have tablets and phones and whatnot. And just before the pandemic, I was actually looking to move into an office. And obviously then this happened, and we just carried on working from home, and the whole world went home and started working from home and doing this sort of thing, which is great. So it's kind of changed my mind as to whether do we really need offices anymore? Apart from yourself, of course, you manufacture a product, you need
a base.
But I mean, for service companies like myself, I have administrative assistant as well, and she quite happily works from her home, always has done since I hired her. And I don't have to drive anywhere in the morning, and neither do my staff. So, well, apart from my engineers. But yeah, so I was just wondering what the future of offices would be like, for especially if offices are all cloud-based now anyway. They might have a central server, but apart from that, it's just people working from laptops and computers anyway.
Yeah,
so
that's a
I'm
good
just
point.
wondering what the future might be for that.
Yeah, it could be a new landscape we're starting to observe, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant, Ian. You've been extremely generous with your time. Do appreciate that. Obviously, we'll be hooking up at some point later. So thank you very much for your time
No
tonight.
problem at all.
And I'll be speaking to you soon. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me on the first podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks, Ian. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.